Want to see how I made this chocolate grape tart out of air dry clay? Then keep on watching. First you will need some air dry clay, the soft type that's kind of squishy and foamy, and also a silicone muffin form. What we will do now is basically the tart crust to resemble chocolate, and I'm mixing up a variety of colors. All the colors can be found down below in the description box, but what you'll see is me taking very small amounts of all the colors. Here I'm putting in deep yellow. Next up is burnt sienna. We have some black, and I think that was it. Yeah, that's it. Welcome to my first YouTube video, y'all. Okay, so rather take small dots before you add a whole bunch. Take small, tiny amounts. Use a toothpick, or I had a dotting tool out of a nail gel kit, and you just dot it on the clay and give it a good squish, squish, squish. You twist it, you twirl it, you make sure it's becoming a homogeneous mass, and then you can always readjust the color of your clay. You're yielding for a light brown color, not a dark one, because the air dry clay will always darken up within the drying process. And here you can see me adding a little bit more burnt sienna for warmth, because I felt like it was a tiny bit too yellow. And here we go. So this is the result I was happy with. It does not look like chocolate. Do not be concerned. Just yield for something lighter in color. You will see the end result soon. Here you see me pressing down the clay into the silicone form. Make sure to press as tightly as you can, as firmly as you can, to make sure that the bottom of the tart is even, and do not stress about the surface being perfectly smooth. That's never happening, and also baked goods don't look like that. Next, we need to make sure that the profile of the silicone form really gets embedded and embossed into the clay. So this is why I will go ahead and squish down on the sides of the form to give it more of a texture. Another tip I would like to give you is to put the clay into the freezer. So it gets solid, and when you basically dump it onto your work surface, it's not gonna have any weird scuff marks, it's not gonna deform, it's gonna stay nice and firm. It will keep its shape. Here comes the grapes. I kind of messed up here, completely lost the footage, but what I did off camera was to make 3 egg-shaped little clay balls, and then I colored each of them individually with their respective color combinations. I will definitely put the color combinations for this type of red, green, and purple down in the description box, so you know exactly what kind of gouache acrylic paints to choose to combine the colors to come up with these colors. And it wasn't really a big deal. You just take a little bit of clay, like I said, you form it into the egg shape, you color it with your acrylic colors, just like I've done with the tart, and then you put them either on toothpicks, or what I've done, I put them on needles and stuck them in a piece of foam so they would dry upright for a full day, right? So what you see here are fully dried grapes, and I'm cutting them all in half. And you will see soon why, because we are going to arrange those grapes later on top of our cream to create the decor. Back to the tart crust. We are creating the effect of powdered sugar by taking a tiny amount of white acrylic paint. It needs to be gouache paint, that's really important, and a tiny piece of a sponge. I just cut out a small piece out of a cleaning sponge, and we're gonna carefully stipple it into the acrylic, and I recommend doing some test stipples on the side like I've just done. That's what you want, what I'm pointing at. Okay. And very, very gently, light pressure, you tap, 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 tap on the very edge of the already fully dried tart crust, okay? And as you can see, it creates this subtle, powdery, sugar icing effect on the crust. It just looks super natural. I think it looks almost like the real deal. Oh, and one important information here, one important point I want to say is that this tart crust has already fully dried. So I recommend making sure that you give roughly 24 hours between making the tart crust, taking it out of the mold, and then stippling on the icing, because the last thing you wanna is the nicely done tart to deform or get any type of indentation while you're holding it and tapping it with a sponge. That would be really sad. That would suck if you lost your project that way. It's really important when you deal with air dry clay and that you give it time to set. Some manufacturers say it takes 7 days to fully set. I found with this piece it was really pretty solid after 24 hours. I would have to cut it in half to find out, how soft it might have been at that point inside, but it was solid enough to touch. Okay. Now, you can also put some powdered sugar on the surface. It gives a very nice appearance, because some of the crust will definitely peek through after you have applied your full cream puffs and your grapes. Time to make the cream. Take some white clay, work it well, make sure to trap some air to give it more of a fluffy texture, and then you need to separate 6 roughly equal portions to form 6 roundish or oval or teardrop shaped cream puffs. Just size them up next to each other. You can also gauge, like I'm doing right here. I'm just putting them on the tart to see how much space I have, how much smaller they need to be. So you will just play it by ear. I'm sorry, I don't have an exact measurement. You need to play it by ear, and that's part of the fun. Just play with it, and it's just so fun. It's so satisfying just pushing those little thingies. Yeah, but that's what you will do to create your puffs. Just a quick tip. If at some point you ever feel like your clay becomes less pliable and dries up too fast, I recommend having like a little misty or spritz bottle with water next to your desk so you can lightly mist it. It will give you a little bit more time to work with your clay. So that has worked for me in the past. And also when it comes to sticking and you find it's not sticking on its own anymore, just go ahead and give it a little spritz. It makes the clay a bit more tacky and easier to adhere. Yeah, so you see me struggling to make a teardrop shape. I found out if I just made balls as best as I could, like a sphere shape, and then squish down and then use my index and thumb to form out a little bit of a sharper point, that it would work best. All right, here we go. Time to stick the cream puffs. So at that point, I haven't realized yet. This is future me commenting on my struggles. I haven't realized yet that, as I mentioned, the clay, the white clay, the cream, would not stick very well onto the crust. But past me will find that out very soon. Anyways, my tip is just use wood glue. It's okay. Just add a little bit onto the crust. We will see me probably doing that later, but it fell off. So as you can see, there is no adhesion here. So I just decided to adhere the little cream puffs to each other on the side on my working mat. And then later on, I just took the whole arrangement and glued it onto the crust because it just wouldn't work. Oh, and also a handy dandy tool I should have brought in earlier is this acrylic plate. It will help you smooth out the surface by just pressing down on your clay in a way that your fingers never will. So that is a great tool to have. All right. And here I'm just doing the last finishing touches before we move on to the next segment. So what are we trying to achieve here? What I'm trying to do is to make sure that the crust is not entirely covered by the cream, meaning that some of the chocolate and the powdered surface have a chance to peek through. You can make it as visible as you want or as, covered as you want, but I still wanted to have the chocolate crust peek through on top, not just on the sides. And I'm using my thumb to smooth out any lines and edges as best as I could. At that point, the clay was already pretty dry. Right, now we're making a dome shape or a cone shape with another piece of air dry clay. And this one stays plain white as well. It looks a little bit like a wizard's hat, like I said, or like a traffic cone. So I'm doing my best to shape it here. Let me tell you, air dry clay works so much differently than, for example, plastilin or polymer clay for sure. It's just different. It's hard to explain if you've never worked with it, but I had to find my way around it. And I think I did quite okay. And again, if you have some other acrylic tools, like maybe ruler-shaped acrylic plates, that would come in handy. I'm using just a disc here to give the top a smoother appearance, and the rest I'm just forming with my fingers. Fingers are the best tools after all. They're free. You have them, I hope. And yeah, works fine. While you're giving your cone your final shape, make sure to keep the grape halves in mind, because the grape halves effectively will sit on top of the cream puffs, the oval ones, and lean against the cone. So while you're shaping it, you can always take the dried halves and size them up to it. Here it is, me gluing the cream because it wouldn't stick anymore. That's what you need to do. Air dry clay is unforgiving. Once you let it air dry, once it hits the air, the process is on and it's go time. You never know how fast it will dry up, depends on the manufacturer. Okay, so I was happy with the final shape of my cone, and now I'm taking the grape halves to assemble on top of the pre-made cream. Personally, I thought it would be a good idea to alternate the colors so they would have a pattern of, let's say, green, purple, red, green, purple, red. And I will need some glue. There it is. There's my wood glue. Just put a little dab on top of your flat surface of each grape, and then you will have to go ahead and assemble them. And that's a little bit fidgety, but you'll manage, don't worry. It's time to assemble the pre-glued grape halves onto your cream cone, and it's pretty straightforward. As you can see, I'm just alternating the colors, pressing down on the grapes. It's totally fine if some of the wood glue squirts or squishes out from underneath the grape. Don't worry about it. We're going to use a glaze afterwards, and that glaze is also composed of wood glue and a little bit of water. So whatever squishes out from underneath the grape, it won't be visible. And also, important note, but I will also leave that information in the description box, your wood glue absolutely needs to dry transparent. That is so important, because the last thing you want is to ruin your piece by having a glaze that will stay opaque forever. Then, it will look nothing like a sugar-coated, glazed piece of fruit. And here is my glaze. It's fairly easy to mix it up. Obviously, it depends on the type of glue you're using, on the brand. But what I just did is I squirted a little bit into a silicone cup, and I used probably 1 or 2 drops of water. It's not much. And all you have to do is grab either a toothpick, or in my case, I'm using a polymer clay shaping tool with a silicone tip. And I'm just stirring it, making sure it becomes a homogeneous mass. And I'm doing that until I have reached the consistency that I like. So, what is the consistency we're looking for? It depends on the finished results you are yielding for. So, for example, if you just want to make your pieces of fruit very shiny, then I would recommend to use a little bit more water to achieve a runnier consistency with your glaze. If you are going for a more thicker, goopier, more like a syrupy honey effect, if that makes sense, more viscous, then I would recommend using more glue than water. Maybe not even any water at all. It depends again on the type of wood glue you're using. I was experimenting quite a bit with this piece. So at the beginning, I had it a bit on the runnier side because I wasn't sure how it would look at the end. But then I decided to go back in and just use the glue pretty much undiluted. And it gave me the goopier effect that I was looking for. More like a jelly, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So that's just my 2 cents on how to make air dry clay glaze. Use wood glue that dries transparent. We are making our last item of the decor. It's going to be a mint leaf, or rather 2 mint leaves on top of our cream cone puff. And yeah, you will find the colors in the description box. And here I am taking a piece of aluminum foil, and what it does, or it's supposed to do, I was semi-successful with it. I try to give the mint leaf more texture. Basically, you know how a mint leaf has those grooves and it looks kind of crinkly? I was really trying to achieve that by pressing some crinkled up aluminum foil on top of the formed clay. Gotta be honest, it did a so-so effect. It wasn't terrible, but it was kind of mediocre. It wasn't smooth, but it wasn't as crinkly as, for example, the aluminum foil. Not sure why. Maybe I should have let it air dry a bit longer. This always, hardens the texture and makes it easier to imprint or emboss on, or carve on. What's the word I'm looking for? You know what I'm saying. To give it a profile, basically, to texturize. That's the word. My goodness. I'm not a thesaurus, that's for sure. But yeah, I still decided to show the process because you might be more successful with it than I was in this case. I was not super happy, but it was acceptable. So yeah, I'm basically forming 2 mint leaves. They're kind of flat, round shape right now, and I decided to just give it more shape by pinching out some of the clay and forming it by hand and with a needle tool into a leaf shape. You'll see. In hindsight, I would honestly just recommend roughly pre-cutting a leaf shape like I'm doing right here, and then just picking that one up and rolling that shape, with your fingers so it resembles a leaf. That's the best you can do. My second method would be to grab a needle tool like I'm doing right here and find the middle, the center of the leaf, and then just press the clay around it. In hindsight, I would probably do that. That worked for me better, and I like the end result better. Alright, here's our glazed tart. What we do is apply a dot of wood glue on top of the cone, like so, and then grab a pair of tweezers, or if you have, finer hands than I do, just apply the leaves on top of the glue. I think tweezers work best because they're kind of tiny and you don't want to squash the shape too much. And you just arrange your leaves the way you like them. Think of mint garnishing a dessert. That's the look you want to go for. Make it look a bit dainty and cute and appetizing and appealing. Okay, now we're done. All you have to do is let your piece dry. I would recommend at least 24 hours. And you will see this is the finished result. I hope you liked it.